Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Tired of stories about other people's success? We can help you change your life, determine your time freedom point, and join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. We are starting into season 3 and we want to have interesting guests and interesting conversations about how to generate money, how to invest, how to generate cash flow. And one of the people who can help us with that, maybe a little bit outside of our typical real estate investing, is Mark Fidelman. And I want to welcome you to the show, Mark.
I appreciate that, Axel. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we do with everybody when we start, can you tell us a little bit what I typically call like the origin story? How did Mark get to where he is? And a little bit maybe on what it is mainly that you do.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make it very quick. So when Bitcoin was first introduced, I thought it was a scam. And I'm like, I want nothing to do with this. But then Ethereum came along, and Ethereum is really a platform for money. It's also now a platform for programs and really anything you can imagine. And then I'm like, okay, now I get it. The problem with all these things, though, is some of them are securities, some of them are utilities. And, I don't want to get too far into that because I don't know if your audience is crypto related. So I said, okay, I see what the SEC is doing. I see what FINRA is doing. Let me move into security tokens. And security tokens leverage the same tools as crypto, but they're not crypto because it's always backed by an asset like real estate. You talk a lot about real estate. Well, real estate's the number one use case for security tokens. And all a security token is think of it as a stock for that real estate. So if you want to break up your commercial building into 1,000 shares, well, then the fastest way to do that, the cheapest, the most affordable, is to tokenize it. And then those tokens represent an interest in that real estate. And I'll get into more what else you can do with that stuff that you can't do with a stock anyway. But that's essentially my journey.
Okay, very cool. So have you always been interested in money and financials or stuff, or was it literally just the emergence of basically crypto?
Well, the older I get, the more I realize money is not the only thing, but it certainly helps people move to Spain and live the life of luxury.
Yeah, so well, at least get more things for your money, that's for sure. So maybe when we dive into this a little bit, I want to tell you one thing that we do in our investing approach is, like I said, when we were talking before recording, we help, and also I do it myself, and then ultimately learn lessons and help others to do the good things and avoid the bad things. But we're basically investing predominantly in residential real estate, but with the purpose, the goal is to generate passive income so that most of us or all of us can ultimately have that time freedom and the choice to live where we want and how we want. Now, obviously, to get that passive income, it's an iterative process where you have your first property, then your second, and so forth, however many properties you want. And each one, if done right, is generating cash flow. So one thing where we have a bridge, and I would love to talk to you a little bit, not specifically about the company, but the principles, is we are using and recommending a platform by the name of Lofty, which basically does what you just described as security tokens. And we recommend it because these tokens cost $50 a piece, at least the new ones. They change in value over time, but fundamentally they cost $50 a piece. And so if a house that somebody like myself or any of our investors invested in generates $300 a month, I can basically fundamentally, to keep it easy, buy 6 new tokens every month from the cash flow, right? And that $300 is basically money after everything has been paid, like literally net income. And the beauty, I hope you would agree, is that anytime I need access to the money, I can basically sell my tokens and have cash basically available to buy the next property. So I call that cash flow parking. But maybe you can say a little bit, one thing that we found is these companies that are basically created to own the underlying property are called DAOs.
Yeah.
And I'm not enough of an expert, and that's why we invited you, among other things. Why is it DAO and what does it mean? And I know I heard something that is also how some of the crypto started, but maybe you can enlighten us a little bit what it is and how does that fit into the picture?
Well, DAO is a special purpose vehicle and usually done in Wyoming. I think North Carolina, South Carolina has it now. So I don't know how these people are set up, but if they're using Wyoming, a DAO is simply kind of, think of it as a community owned company and the community gets to vote. So I don't know how Lofty's set up. I'm going to check them out.
Yeah, we get to vote. I mean, I obviously, like I said, I'm always trying to be like a good example and try it before. And it's exactly like you said, right? Like they buy, let's say, a $250,000 house. Let's say that would be the all-in cost. And so that basically means it's 2,000 tokens, right? And so then the rules say, and this is specific to this platform, they say nobody can own more than 15% of all the tokens.
Yeah, of course.
Right, so that you don't have somebody who makes all the decisions, especially when there are issues with renters and stuff. So that basically means even if you had people that wanted to buy 15%, you have at least 4 owners, and those 4 people would then basically vote whenever there's something to be voted on. The reality is it's much more like typically on the 2,000 token property is probably like a couple hundred owners, something like that. You know.
So what you're describing is security tokens, but security tokens go even beyond that. I want to go look at Lofty's model because I'm surprised they might not call it a security token, but that's what it sounds like. Is everything traded in exchanges? Like, how do you sell these Lofty tokens?
Basically, they have something called the marketplace. I would call Lofty more a platform than just an organization. So in the marketplace, they show the properties before they're being acquired. And the process between we have a property that we have committed to buy until the DAO is set up and everything else is set up, people can already see it, can do their due diligence and stuff like that, see how many tokens will be there. And the marketplace is basically showing you what's on offer. It also is available if you, for whatever reason, want to sell tokens. You have 2 options. You can sell the tokens through the overall marketplace, but you can also sell them theoretically from one owner to another.
Yeah.
Now, never can any owner through buying additional tokens get beyond 15%, like I said. But fundamentally, if I have a few tokens and obviously the tokens or the properties are actually generating rent, which generates income. So I generate income on the platform, and if I get to, let's say, $55, I could buy a token, right? And I could buy a token of any of the properties that is available for a new purchase, but also from somebody who says, oh, I just, want to sell some of mine directly rather than back to the organization. So it's not really an exchange in the sense like Binance or Coinbase or something like that, but it's similar in the sense that everything that has ever been acquired by all the different people that hold tokens under the umbrella of the platform is available to buy and trade and so forth.
That sounds like version 1 of security tokens. And I don't mean to demean it. I really love the model, which is why I love security tokens. But with security tokens, you can trade it anywhere internationally on any exchange that lists it. So like a Uniswap, PancakeSwap, any of these things, it can be traded anywhere. Plus with smart contracts, and all a smart contract is an intelligent program that watches what goes on and executes things automatically. You can't acquire more than 15% if that's a rule. With the Lofty model, you and I and 4 other people could get together and we'd all collectively own more than 15%. And we could potentially change the voting on that. With security tokens, they make it much harder. I don't know if that's a big concern or not in the industry. But what I love about security tokens is because it's got smart contracts. Let's say you invested into a portfolio of residential homes that were being Airbnb'd. And this is just one example. And they say, hey, if you own 10 tokens or more, we give you 2 or 3 free nights automatically at any of these Airbnbs. I mean, you could literally program it to do anything. And so I think an advanced model of what you're doing at Lofty, but now I don't need to educate your listeners as to the value of security tokens. It's the same thing. You could buy into not just real estate, but companies. There's patents that you could buy into. There's royalties from oil wells. So you could diversify a little bit out of real estate. Real estate's my number 1 love, but there's other things. Real estate just doesn't always go up. Over time it does, but who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years. So if you wanted to diversify out of real estate, there are other options with security tokens that you can get into. The other advantages with security tokens in real estate is you can invest in what BlackRock's investing in.
Right.
Some of these properties that they're coming out with have been tokenized. So now you get the returns and the alpha with some of these big boys. You get to participate with the big boys where there's no way in heck you or I or anyone else could participate in it unless we're an institution putting a minimum of $100 million in these things. Now you can do it with $1,000.
Absolutely. And that's actually great that you mentioned that, because that was the main thing for us to recommend this one platform. And I'm totally aware, and I'm glad that you're here to help us even expand our view on that. The main thing was to say, okay, if we are all agreeing that fundamentally this particular part of our money goes into real estate, then if you had, like I said, $300 a month coming in, you can't do syndication, you can't really do much meaningful. And until recently, you couldn't even get anything out of your savings account. But by being able to buy basically in $50 increments, it just meant you could do something meaningful with the money and have it appreciate. And obviously, when your main focus is cash flow, the individual appreciation of the property, whether it's one that we own directly or that we own indirectly through tokens, is not the main focus. The idea is not to buy properties to sell them and make the profit there. It's basically to have them generate income and have the tenants pay off the mortgages, right? So, but can you expand a little bit? What are the things that you currently favor, and give us maybe some examples of what kind of like the ROI is?
Yeah, well, right now, I did an analysis on some of the companies that are already public in terms of they've tokenized their equity, portfolios of royalties coming from oil wells, real estate, that have shown a consistent dividend. And if you put $1,000 a month for 10 years, now I know a lot of people listening probably can't afford to do that, but if you can, or any level of increment in between that, then at the end of that, you're making $30,000 a month. And with it, hopefully inflation doesn't go out of control. That's a pretty good monthly income just by putting $1,000 a month in for 10 years. Now, I will say the other beautiful thing about security tokens is what's called DeFi, which is decentralized finance, which is just another word of saying that you cut out the middleman and you can borrow and lend money. So as you're investing in these security tokens, well, guess what? Maybe you need $100,000 out because you've been putting it in for 10 years. Well, you can literally borrow money by putting up the equity in your own security tokens. And there are people that will lend you money based on those security tokens that hold these other objects. So that's all built in to the security token model.
Kind of like a home equity loan, right? In a sense, you're using the equity that you have in your tokens to get
in your wallet. You just say, here's my wallet. You know, it's easy to check. It's all verifiable.
Yeah.
You don't have a bank involved. You don't have these bureaucrats involved. You just have regular people that want to lend you money at 3%, 4%, whatever it is that they're looking for. And it's global. So we have a high interest rates in the US, but it's not high interest rates in the rest of the world. So let's just say, and I'm making this up, in Japan, the interest rate's 1% there. Well, they'll give you a loan at 3%. Well, you can't get a 3% loan here in the US anymore. So there's quite a lot of advantages and tax advantages to doing it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. Now, you said you did some research and you found if people put $12,000 for 10 years, so basically $120,000, they can generate up to $30,000 in income. Is that based out of the performance, out of the tokens? Or, you know, normally when you hear those kind of calculations, somebody would say, okay, within those 10 years, $120,000, the equity value, even if the term is not quite right, has grown from 120,000 to, I don't know, like 800,000 or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
And then you can start drawing from it without consuming it completely or ever for that matter. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And this is based on current models. You'll find the more people tokenize, the more aggressive they'll need to be in their terms, hopefully not too aggressive, so that you'll see even better deals that are out there. But especially with real estate, you know, part of that is they're selling the properties along the way. Airbnb, those are very lucrative. You know, if you invest a security token that's investing in Airbnbs across the United States right now in the US, and I don't know about Europe. I study mainly in the US. It's a very lucrative thing. But you know why I don't like doing the work? I've done it. I've managed an Airbnb. I've bought rental properties. I'd rather have, you know, give money to somebody else that's done it with a proven track record. And it's like the Lofty model. I just want to sit back and collect, and then I'll vote every once in a while if they're not doing their job.
Yeah, exactly. That is one pathway to make things even more passive. Then when you do a turnkey model where you basically say, okay, somebody offers me a property, I do my due diligence, I find it lucrative, it's managed by the same people that offer it to me. I have months and months a call for my 4 properties. I mean, I'm talking about my exact example, right? Like I have a cluster in Ohio, talk to them once a month for 25 minutes, something like that, and all I need to do. And obviously I get electronic reports about every little thing, every faucet that they fixed or whatever without me having to do anything. That's exactly what we want. And it sounds like the tokenization could take that even further. I mean, there's still, if you never look at what you're doing, then it's probably not smart. But with minimal effort and oversight to have this kind of machine kind of work for us. Now, you mentioned that the biggest area is real estate based, and you mentioned oil or energy. Are there any other areas that you would say show real big promise without too much risk?
Always $1 million question. Well, companies like Goldman Sachs and Citi, and they're tokenizing bonds.
Okay.
So now we can participate in the bond market anywhere in the world as long as it's tokenized. And that's one of the benefits of tokenization and security tokens. But there's a company called Masterworks that buys up paintings and art and puts that up. I'm not a big fan of that.
I'm following a YouTube channel called Now You Know. I really like these 2 guys, and they have that marketplace as an advertiser. And I've always been thinking, maybe I'm too old-fashioned, but art is in the eye of the beholder, to say what I think has, because I mean, it's not the paint and the canvas, it's obviously what you believe the creation is worth, right? It's not like gold or oil or real estate or something like that is pretty easily measurable. So yeah, but I mean, I know that's a cool thing. I mean, I would say that is at least a little better in my old-fashioned view than NFTs.
Yeah, I don't like NFT version 1, but version 2 is tied to real estate or all these other things. It acts like a security token. Those NFTs are okay. I mean,
and I don't mean that part of the token. I meant like the underlying.
Yeah. It's just a JPEG that you and I could just take off the internet anyway.
Yeah.
So what if I own a JPEG? Everybody else can too. Not own, but we can use it. I mean, for whatever purpose that we have. Yeah. I would not buy NFT version 1 at all.
Yeah. I'm with you, and I think it's amazing to me that there were so many people that could be convinced that that is something. But on the other hand, that has happened, over the, I don't know, millennia.
Tulips, Beanie Babies, you can go on and on. It's the same phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. The one difference I have to say is in those older versions, Beanie Babies being one example, you had at least something tangible. with a GIF or something like that sitting on your hard drive. I'm not so sure.
I know there's all these NFT copycats that have popped up too for every subgenre you can think of. My son gets into all sorts of like military equipment that he's trading as JPEGs, and these kids are bidding me up and down. And I'm like, what is this? It's not real. It's fantasy. Yet they're continuing to get kids to buy these cards that represent military equipment. It's like, what?
Yeah, I actually had a crazy idea, and I want to preface it as a crazy idea. One thing that we have been getting into, and has nothing to do necessarily with investing or only at the fringes, is that we obviously want to educate our listeners, our audience, our community. And so one way to do that is writing articles and making posts on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. And I kept running into the issue of how do I make sure that I'm not infringing on anybody's copyright, right? So ultimately, somebody, I don't know even how it was, I stumbled upon these new AI tools like Midjourney and DALL-E and stuff like that. I thought, let me see if an old guy like me can actually figure out how to make a picture on like Midjourney or DALL-E. I figured out Midjourney is too strange to me. I can't figure out the interface, but DALL-E was simple enough for me.
Yeah.
So now I can make images that I made them with the help of the AI. And here comes the crazy idea. I was like, how about I make those for NFT? Right, then I can at least say they are only based on my particular phrase. Right, that would make some sense to me to say I originated the phrase, I picked the 1 or 4 or 10 or however many suggestions, I deleted the other one. Then it's at least only that one at that instant on my phrase and makes it unique, right? But then I thought, okay, who tells me that the same phrase wouldn't make the same picture?
Right.
So, I mean, it's pretty crazy where all this stuff is going, and I hope that we can all kind of keep up with it. Now, one thing that I'm sure our audience, as much as we have fun with this, but can you say a little bit about any concerns about security, especially like I'm hearing lately, SEC is kind of, in my opinion, and I know that I should be careful in this stuff, but in my opinion, they are on a fast track to lose any credibility right now by their actions, because they approve something and then they sue the people they approve
Right.
for the things that they approved. To me,
Right.
like I always use simple examples like parenting, right? If I allow my kids to go out and play soccer and then I try to sue them for playing soccer, that makes no sense.
Right. Well, let's remember one thing. These SEC people are former investment bankers, and they're protecting the establishment. And it's a natural reaction. We saw the same thing with Uber as they were going into these cities, and the taxi cab unions were all suing Uber and suing the city for allowing these things to happen. We're going to go through a period of that, and then there's some clarity is going to result. If your audience knows about Ripple, the SEC came down on them, Ripple sued, and won in part a motion to dismiss. I'll keep it simple, the language, especially around the SEC was calling Ripple a security, and the judge said, no, it's not a security in most cases, except for this one use case. Then because of the way they marketed it, they thought it was a security. Anyway, regulatory clarity is going to come. But that's why I'm in security tokens, because security tokens are already approved by FINRA and the SEC because it follows a Reg D, Reg A, Reg S, Reg CF process that's already been put in place. So as long as you follow that process, you're approved.
Right. I am somewhat jokingly, I would say, I think the guys who run Coinbase thought with their approval to run the exchange, they were.
Oh, I know. And worse for them, they were allowed to go public. You know how hard it is to go public on a stock exchange. So wait a second, we're allowed to go public on a stock exchange. You know our business model, but now you're going to sue us for, you know, certain activities that we're doing that we disclosed when we went public. I mean, the rationale behind that is mind-blowing, and the SEC should be fined, and all of Coinbase's legal expenses should be refunded immediately. But, you know, we'll see how.
I'm with you on that. I mean, the finer point is, like you said, protecting contingencies is one thing. It seems to me even worse when, while you're doing that, you don't mind getting your election campaigns funded by the people that you're regulating, right?
When you're politicizing these things, I have a big problem with it, because we're not talking about who's getting elected. We're talking about people's money and allowing the average person to invest in what bigger companies are doing and profiting from. But when they say the rich get richer, well, this is one of the ways how they do it. They invest in things that you and I don't get access to. With tokenization, with even crypto, we do. The problem with crypto, of course, is we're not very good at self-policing, and we let meme coins like Doge and others, Shibu and all these things with no value whatsoever go straight up, and then, you know, they crash. We also had FTX, which we had no oversight, take in a bunch of money and then crash. So that's the big problem, and that's they always point to that, say, look what can happen in crypto if you don't monitor and you don't follow the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very glad that you point out these points, because I wish that there were at least some consistency, right? Because if you go back, what is it now, 13 years or so, 14 years, you could have said, okay, well, are we shutting down all the banks who did derivatives trading in 2009? Well, we didn't. Nobody went to jail or something like that. Now they're trying desperately to put people to jail from the exchange.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that stuff keeps happening, and I'm sure there were other examples before that, before we had like the financial crisis, you know, government borrowing crazy amounts of money, all these kind of things. But back to the point of the security tokens, if somebody says, okay, to have this as an opportunity and diversify, like I said, my recommendation, and I'm always holding myself to that kind of guideline, is to only get things and recommend things that I understand, and which is obviously then narrowing it down to real estate. But if somebody were to say, I would want to diversify a little bit, how would you recommend to go about that? And how can you maybe help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a newsletter where I cover these things every single week. It's called Kryptonized .substack.com. I would subscribe to that, and I put it out there every week. I've looked at a lot of these security tokens, and I kind of give you the good and the bad. I'm not a broker that's registered with FINRA, so I can't give you a definitive thing. I would just tell you what I would do.
Right.
That's how I get around it, and you make your own decisions. But that's something that people could look at. There's also exchanges like INX, T0, Securitize.io, Red Swan. Is all of that Red Swan is commercial real estate that's been tokenized that you can invest in. And I know the CEOs of all these companies, so I recommend them because I know them. And these are exchanges, and my company works with them to bring companies public on them. I have a level of trust with them. So those are ways of finding these things out. I think there are some analysts, there's not enough of them. They're out there doing what I do at a technical level, because these really are companies and they should be evaluated just like a stock is evaluated.
At least evaluated and performance measured and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So from a process perspective, would somebody then establish an account on any of those exchanges, send over some money, and then start putting tokens either on the exchange or in a wallet?
Yeah, in a wallet that they provide. And by the way, these wallets are very secure because everything in a security token is whitelisted, meaning if somebody hacks your wallet for whatever reason, you get it right back. You just call the company up and you say, cancel these and reissue them as this. You can't do that with crypto.
In a way, I don't want to lean out too far out of the window, but in a way have with a Lofty platform that I mentioned, when they first started, they used Algorand, which ultimately turned out to be tricky, not only because it obviously treated it like crypto, where you basically, if it was in there and you forgot your terms or the words, you couldn't get into it anymore, but it was also then exposed to potential hackers or stuff like that. And so they ultimately decided to do exactly what you just said, Mark, and basically created their own security token infrastructure. So number one, it is better controlled, but number two is also for every purchase transaction, there's not just the underlying security or house in that sense, but there's also a record of the transactions, obviously. So if somebody says, okay, I have an issue with access, then you can go back and say, I can prove that I actually own these.
Right. And that's a beauty. You can't do that with crypto. Yeah. So another reason.
Yeah, exactly. Although on the other hand, you're buying independence if you have it really only under your own thing. You just have to paste your words everywhere so you never lose. Okay, Mark, that was great. I think this is a field that is going to be the future in all kinds of variations that we might not even be able to imagine at this point. But I think it's definitely, at least my hope, to be honest, my hope is that we get away from these traditional systems, that when I want to send money, the true settlement of the money is 9 months later or stuff like that. Or, if you want to buy a house, like straight out, like we do with our investors, and it's typically 4 months or longer, even though the underlying physical and financial transaction shouldn't be that hard, and so I think a future where all of this is much easier, much more transparent, and less under control of people with special interests, I think it's the better.
Me too. And it's all going to be transparent, and it is transparent on the blockchain. So even more than Lofty, anyone at any time can see every single transaction that took place. So it's much more transparent and safe.
Very good. So at the end of the show, I always ask 2 questions not related to investing. So I want to ask those to you too. If you could meet anybody, who would it be and why?
Living or dead?
Doesn't matter.
Wow. I mean, right now would be Elon Musk. Okay. I just find him, how successful has he been in every industry that he's ever undertook? That there's a secret sauce to this man, and I'd like to see it firsthand.
Yeah, I would come along and participate in that conversation. The other one is, if you had a time machine, where would you go and why?
Ooh. Well, I'd go in the future.
Okay.
Because how far? Wow. Do I have to stay there permanently?
No, it's a time machine. Okay. So you can dial it. You have to be careful. If you destroy it, you're stuck, right?
Yeah, because I don't want to miss my kids growing up, right? So I would say 50 years. Just put me 50 years into the future. It'd be nice to see, and hopefully there is a future of mankind. But probably 50 years, I think we'll see significant advancements, especially with AI helping us. I think by then people live forever if they want to. I wouldn't mind seeing that and see what it looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if it's not here, since you mentioned Elon, he always says either we go out with a bang or with a whimper. But either way, we should have an alternative. Yeah, and in 50 years, maybe you see us all sitting in a city on Mars or something, you know.
Yeah, it could be. If his dream comes to reality, and I would never bet against him. We'll
No, me
see
neither. Yeah.
a colony of people up there in the next 20 years. I would never want to do it. My son would for some reason, but no, thank you. I wouldn't want to be up in another planet. As bad as this one can be, but it's also a great place to live. I wouldn't want to be on Mars.
Yeah. Well, see, not everybody wanted to be a pilgrim either, right? Like, so.
Exactly. There's early adopters and everything, and let them go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then maybe you go visit, you know, with a second time machine or something.
Oh, maybe with a time machine. No, but I'll just use Zoom. I think there'd be like a
Laser
3-minute delay,
yeah, be
3-minute
laser
delay or
Zoom.
something. But yeah.
Well, if then the internet craps out, you have to wait half an hour.
But also, it's not a live conversation. It'd be like, I think it's a 3-minute delay between Mars and here. But I could be wrong. The sun, it takes 7 minutes for light to reach Earth from the sun. So Mars is about what, half that distance, maybe less.
Yeah, but you would have to have light-based or laser-based communications, you know, because
but still takes time. Speed of light, it still weighs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it might be bending, so it takes longer. Who knows?
We're getting into quantum physics now.
Yeah. No, let's not do that. Again, Mark, it was great to have you. How can people get a hold of you? You mentioned the newsletter. Is there anything else that people should know?
Yes, I mean, Twitter at Mark Fidelman, and then my website is smartblocks.agency if anyone's interested in tokenizing their properties or assets.
Right. And if you watch this in a year or two, then it's X ad.
I think he just officially made the change, so you're right.
Yeah, I know. Okay, cool. Mark, thank you so much for being here, keeping it light and fun. And I think we should maybe do this again in a year or so and see what we've gotten.
Well, I would love to.
All right, cool.